And we're back for part 2 of my fun adventures on Venus. I have something set up here that's supposed to be the beginnings of my rebreather. Also, yeah, this isn't exactly starting where the last one left off because I may have lost some of that footage, but I promise this is only about 2 minutes into the future. But anyway, yeah, the rebreather. This isn't exactly a working design, and I'm not sure what I was thinking when I was building it. See, the waste canister goes in here, breathable air is filtered outside to never be used again, but the unusable carbon dioxide is stored here for no reason whatsoever. So yeah, I'm gonna need to redesign this thing. And yeah, I know I have carbon filters here, so it wouldn't actually work that way, but originally I had oxygen filters there and just put those carbon filters there to attempt to fix it. But realized when I use this thing for filtering the room itself, it wouldn't be able to filter anything but carbon, so it may technically work for my waste tank now, but I still need to redesign it. And it's now mostly completed. This is part of the original design, but with the pipes changed around so the oxygen is now stored instead of filtered out, and the other gases are thrown out by connecting the waste pipe with the pipe from the active vent I already had set up. The oxygen gets stored in this pipe loop that's part of an air conditioning chain, which is supposed to cool the oxygen down to around 20 degrees Celsius for me to reuse. The air conditioners work by inputting the gas that you want to heat or cool on this end, then outputting that gas on this end with the efficiency of the temperature change between the two ends based on the gas of the waste pipe on this end. The efficiency of the air conditioner can be checked from this screen here and is mostly determined from the temperature and pressure differences between the input-output loop and the waste pipe. The greater the difference, the worse the efficiency is for pressure. For temperature, that's mostly the same as well, but only on the hot side for cooling and the cold side for heating. Like, if you were to try and cool down this waste tank air, we'd be getting a higher efficiency if the air outside was colder, and even higher efficiencies the colder it was. Which is why I'm running 4 in a row like this instead of just 1, since the air conditioners wouldn't have to do as much work, although at that point you could just throw your tanks outside to cool them instead of building these, but whatever. In real life, we're trying to cool down from the ridiculous heat of about 464 degrees Celsius from outside the base, so yeah, the efficiency would be very low if you didn't use enough of these units. Also, yes, you can just loop together the input and output of the air conditioners like this, and I don't believe it makes any difference in efficiency. But you do want the air conditioner to incrementally go up or down in their target temps like this. Having it like this gives you higher efficiency, and that really matters with these things because this is going to use a major amount of power, since each of these things uses about 350 watts per game tick when active, which is about 1.4 kilowatts of power altogether. It's probably going to cost entire stacks of coal to get a few tanks of waste to a breathable temp, but with this we can now recycle our waste air. Once the gas is at the right temp, I turn on the pump, which I'm going to cable up at some point, and fill up my tank with what I need. The valves and pump on the side there are for filling up the cooling loops of the air conditioners. I tend to just use the outside air for that, but you can upgrade that later by using a pure gas of something that has a low condensation point, like nitrogen or oxygen. And here I am, incorrectly trying to upgrade my rebreather by adding a vent for filtering the air inside my base along with waste tank gas. I put it on the output side instead of the input side of the filter, but I'll fix it at some point. Doing that will let me save oxygen from the trace amount generated by smelting gold in the arc furnace, as well as any that just finds its way in my base. Most of the trades I'm going to be making for oxygen are going to be for it in its ice or liquid form, so I want an easy way to throw it in this thing, and just letting it melt or evaporate in this room is way easier than making an ice crusher or canister holder for the liquid variety. And yeah, using this thing involves a lot of waiting. It drains my power so quickly, I can't turn it on and forget about it quite yet, so I have to keep babying it. But at least I won't suffocate to death as easily now. I picked 20 degrees, but here you could get away with 30 if you wanted to, but the lower you go, the longer the tank lasts, so I prefer for it to be as low as I can get it. So after much time passes trying to get the temperature of this thing down, we finally get our first storm. Without any wind turbines up, I kind of feel like this is just a waste of free energy, but there's nothing I can do now without this air being ready. If I went out now, I'd practically burn away what little I do have, so I'm gonna have to wait for the next time. Alright, and with the active vent now on the right side of the rebreather, I'm going to let out the air from the starter tank and combine it with the air in the rebreather's tank. Doing this, I'll be able to deconstruct this tank and save a bit more on space. I'm definitely going to want that, as I'm going to try and use almost every square inch in this place, since expanding isn't really practical at the moment, but here we go. Just turn the valve, and yeah, there wasn't that much left in there anyway, but every bit matters right now. I finally finished fabricating the furnace and place it with the gauge facing forward and up just like this. I always like to place it like that just for consistency's sake and to give the pipes in the back enough space to be inside my base. And here's the piping for it. I have one pump that takes gas out of the furnace on the output end and sends it to this pipe, which extends all the way to the waste pipe that leads outside, and another pump at the input end that can either pump in gas from the outside if I open this valve here, or it can accept gas from a canister that I put into this canister slot here. Once we start getting ice trades from the trader, this input side will become mostly useless and will be completely redesigned. But for now, I need the canister holder to put in our only source of fuel at the moment. And that only source would be the fuel canister from the welder. Now, to be honest, for the longest time playing this game, I never really thought about using the fuel canister from the welder for some reason. And in previous runs on this planet, I would add a pipe heater to the input side to heat up to the target temp. Now, obviously, that is a terrible way of doing it because of how power and time intensive it is, but for some reason, I always thought the fuel in the fuel canister wasn't enough to heat this thing up to make steel. Now, even though this is a way better method, you do have a bit of risk here in how much fuel you use. Use too much, and you won't be able to finish welding the landing pads and satellite dish. You need to start trading, and you basically have to restart right there. So make sure you use the least amount of this stuff as possible. I did find that you can intentionally heat up the fuel canister to create more fuel for the welder, but if you need to do this, be careful not to let it get above 300 degrees Celsius, or you'll be turning that tank into a live hand grenade. Once the target pressure and temperature is reached, we finally get steel, and enough to make all the landing pads and batteries we'll need. The target temperature for steel is around 900 Kelvin to 100 kilokelvin, with the pressure being between 1 to 100 megapascals. You also need a ratio of 3 iron to 1 coal or charcoal as the base materials to make it. I think crafting 100 steel from 75 iron and 25 coal is a good starting amount for steel, but you could probably get away with a bit more or less than that. And also, I have to admit, I don't really remember any of these crafting requirements by memory usually. Rather, I tend to use the F2 menu or wiki when I forget something like that. And despite needing the trader really bad, I start with making another large battery cell, because I'm really tired of the power low warning going off all the time. It'll still run out eventually, but this thing can hold 8 times the amount of the small cell, so yeah, I'm making it first. Then after that, I may as well take advantage of the leftover energy from the furnace and smelt some electrum and solder. Since the target temperature for both of these is so low, they're a good go-to after making steel, since you'll also need them for making more advanced parts later on. I'll start with electrum first, since its temperature requirements are higher than solder, but solder's is so low that I actually need to cool down my furnace below the outside temperature by throwing in some extra ore to smelt. I'm not going to make a lot of these starting out, but we're not going to need much right now anyway. And now I can finally make everything for trading. We're going to need about 10 basic landing pads, 1 small satellite dish, 1 computer, and 1 communications motherboard to get some basic trading going. Oh, and also a lot of cables, since I need to set up this pad outside. It's technically optional, but you're going to want to at least have some basic knowledge of using logic in this game if you want to trade from inside your base. After this, I'll be switching everything over to an IC circuit, but for this at least, you're going to need to use logic until then. We only have 3 things we need to control on the small dish from the inside of our base: the power, the horizontal direction, and vertical direction. So we'll also need 3 logic writers, 3 logic readers, and the logic switch and dials for the interface. Set up the center landing pad with the landing pad's center. The arrow indicates the direction the trader will land from, and surround it with landing pad crosses to make a 3x3 pad. I think other landing pad variants also work in place of the cross one, but I haven't tested that out myself. place the landing pad data and power just outside the pad where it'll still be connected, and then weld and wire everything up. You'll also want to hook up the data port of everything together if you want the logic units to find everything. You're also going to want to set up the dish outside with the data and power unit, but I forget to fabricate it for now. I instead start with the logic for controlling the dish and making the switches. Then on the readers and writers, I also decided to make a logic memory and math unit because I seem to mistakenly think that I'm making a solar tracker instead of a dish controller, so those will just sit there and do nothing. But I still choose to wire everything up. Just to explain a little on how readers and writers work, the logic reader grabs information from the input structure you set with the in pin on the left and reads whatever information from it that you set on the var pin. The logic writer takes the information from the reader when put into the in pin and outputs it into the target structure set by the out pin and specifies what variable of the target is changed by the out var pin. For example, if I want to turn the dish on using this switch, I need to set the reader's in pin to the switch, and var pin to setting, which should be 0 for off and 1 for on. For the writer, I set the in pin to the reader I just set, and the out pin to the dish. Then I set the out var pin to the dish's on variable. Now, whatever the power state of the switch is will also be the state that the dish is in, and the same is done with the other variables except with the horizontal and vertical variables being set for the out var pin for the others. Also, I need to set the horizontal dial to turn from 0 to 360 and the vertical to go from 0 to 90, since that's the maximum and minimum turn angles for all the dishes. Well, after that, I finally started making the small satellite dish and set it up outside. It's also important to set this thing to max power. At the default at the lowest power setting, you won't find any trades, and max power for this thing isn't that bad for our base, but we won't want to use this at the same time as our air conditioners. I turn on the computer and flip the switch, and we get a hit right away. Meteor mechanics is our first trader we find, and the trading mechanics is its own in-depth thing to talk about in and of itself. But I'm just going to mention that with our little 3x3 pad and weak starter dish, we're only going to be getting one or very rarely 2 trades on our computer here that can land. You need to play this little mini game here with the dials to find the right angle to point the dish to get it aligned enough with where the trader is to interrogate them. Now, aligning the dish in and of itself doesn't use a lot of power, but it's when you start interrogating that the power shown on the dish that you set it to is used. In this case, we set it to the max at 200 watts per game tick, so not a lot, but we still have 2 more tiers of dishes to go, and this thing really does suck at finding anyone. I finally get him to land, but he isn't selling anything I'm willing to spend my puny 200 space bucks on, so I kick him off my pad. I place some lockers and put the starter crate and everything in it into them when another storm hit, and I realized that I still didn't have wind power up. I didn't want to pass this up again, so I quickly fabricated a wind turbine and went outside to place it. These storms more efficiently kill my frame rate than me, but they still shouldn't be underestimated. This one pretty much finished off the solar panel I had up there, and you can't really see anything or use the jetpack very well while one is happening. But I get up and make it back in just fine. And just as I make it in, the storm ends. Well, no extra power for me. I go outside and add some more turbines anyway to give me more passive power. This should just be enough to charge the cell when nothing is on. And I got another trader. This time Stellar Streams. I think it's important to note that as far as I can tell, the names give you a good idea of what that trader can sell. So just memorizing or looking up who sells what can tell you when to bother or not. For now, our first priorities are oxygen, water, and food in that order from most to least important. This is the first trader I actually trade with, and it does sell both water and oxygen, but because I'm perpetually not paying attention, I think that because the oxygen he's selling is in liquid form, that it's useless to me and only buy some water bottles. Thankfully, I get him again as the next trader and buy some liquid O2 from him. See, you can easily convert this into gas on this planet by just opening it up in a small room like my airlock here and just venting in some external hot air from the outside. wait a little bit. And there you go, gaseous oxygen. I overdo the heating up process and now have to air condition it down by a lot, but I now have a decent amount of air. I can now open up the airlock when it's all gas and use the rebreather's vent to add it to the tank. I'm gonna leave that trader up there actually because he has more things that I'd like, but with only $15 to my name, I'll need to make that supply kit that he wants me to sell him. It'll require 10 basic cables and 10 plastic sheets, 2 carbon dioxide filters, 2 rolls of duct tape, and all that needs to be packaged in a cardboard box, but it should give me enough money to buy another liquid oxygen tank. I just need to build the tool fabricator to make the duct tape, and I'm good. Then I just repeat what I did last time and apparently also overheated again, but thankfully not by as much this time. And now I'm sitting at a decent 11 megapascals of oxygen. And with that, I'm done with this part. Since my supply of air is pretty good now, next time I just need to start getting more food and water from trades and upgrade the landing pad and battery for my base. But that'll be for part 3. Bye bye everyone.